Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. This is Catherine Tindall. I'm a CPA over at Dominion Enterprise Services. We're a specialty tax and accounting firm that works for financial advisors. And on today's episode, I have Brandon Lovingier. He's the AKA the Enlisted Money guy. He's an Army veteran with over 18 years of service, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. And after a period of financial missteps, he and his wife became debt-free and started building wealth. He launched his blog, Enlisted Money, which helps fellow service members avoid similar mistakes. He earned his CHFC in 2022 and is among the first MQFP designation holders. Speaker at Mill MoneyCon, he is dedicated to mentoring others on their financial freedom journey. And we connected after a podcast that he was on and had a great conversation about paraplanning and what advisors should know about that. And that's some work that he's involved with. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about paraplanning and how you can get that into your practice and benefits that you've been seeing from advisors using it in terms of tax planning, workflow, prep, that sort of thing. So thanks for joining me on today's show.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Definitely something that's really fun to talk about. It's not something that everybody knows a lot about. So glad to be here.
Yeah. And I was having a conversation with a coach, a financial advisor coach a couple of weeks ago, and he had a really great point, which was just, you really need to know what your strengths are. And for a lot of advisors, I think they have this not limiting belief, but something I hear often of the, oh, well, I'm here to do all of the planning. And that's really where I shine. And he was saying, for a lot of advisors to be able to take a step back and say, well, where are my strengths really? And what should I be doing? And what pieces of what I'm doing really somebody else should do? So I thought this would be a great conversation to follow up with that, because I think for a lot of advisors, at least that I talk to, paraplanning is something that's sort of on their radar, but not really. What have been things that you've seen in practice from people that have been able to take advantage of working with a paraplanner? And when do you think it's the right time for them to start think about, bringing a paraplanner into their practice?
Yeah, I mean, paraplanning is kind of one of those where it can kind of mean different things to different people. But to your point,
Mhm.
if you're looking for outsourcing something that maybe isn't your strong suit, or maybe you just don't like to do as much, there's probably somebody out there that's trying to get into this profession or just wants some additional flexibility in their life that can take on some of those tasks in a paraplanning role. It's just like for me, I'm a career changer, so this is something I'm doing to bridge my career after military service. But I have friends that are paraplanners that they choose to do outsource paraplanning just because they have expertise, they love the work, but they don't really want to run their own practice. They want to have a little more flexibility, something like that. So there's, for everything that you don't like to do or don't want to do or don't feel you're strong at, there's probably somebody out there that is willing to help you out. And so I think it's a great way to add additional skill sets, but also I think one thing that people don't think about is just different perspective. There's a lot of times where I'll ask a question about, hey, well, I'm sure there's a reason, but why are you doing it this way? Or why, are we doing this way? Did you know about this tool? Because I was exposed to this tool over here working with another advisor. So there's a lot of different perspectives and just things that come up whenever you bring in a second set of eyes that I think that kind of gets missed sometimes as a benefit of having just somebody else involved in that process.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And especially somebody, if they're more like a fractional paraplanner, where you're getting the benefit of them experiencing a bunch of other practices too, and
Mhm.
kind of getting the best of what they've been seeing from, other people in the space. For people that are interested in have sort of bringing a paraplanner on to offboard some things that they don't like working with, do you find like finding somebody in a contracting position where they're more a fractional person is the best place to start? Or where do you recommend people like start to dip their toes into bringing somebody in?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't think there's a wrong answer. Now, for me, I've kind of played in traffic, so to speak, and just found people that were needing some additional help and then offered what I do and kind of did it that way. But there's certainly there's services out there that, they will find the paraplanner for you, all that kind of stuff, and do like a placement or something like that. Or a lot of advisors like to have somebody that's just strictly dedicated to them, so they can work with one-on-one with their paraplanner and have the same paraplanner every time. And so there's services like Simply Paraplanner, where they actually have a listing of people. Actually, I think they still have like resumes for different paraplanners on their website. You can also do an actual, job placement with them, and even hire them to find you somebody. So there are services out there to help in that process. So it doesn't have to be just throwing out a big thing on LinkedIn or whatever, like, hey, who wants to do paraplanning? So and then as far as like whether you do like a 1099 or you have W-2 or whatever, it really just, I think that just depends on your business and how much work you think you're going to have. I think one thing that you don't want to do is have somebody and try and build that relationship and then not give them any hours. So if you don't have, I would say 5 to 10 hours a week of planning work, or to give them, then maybe you're not quite ready for a paraplanner. But that's kind of, I think, kind of that threshold. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense for somebody to only do a couple of hours a week in general. So because if you're going to do this for a living, then it's just really hard to make that work if you've got 5 or 6 clients and you're only doing a few hours here and there. So I think kind of that sweet spot is where you have your systems in place, you kind of know, what your processes are, but you're kind of bumping up against capacity issues, or you just need a little bit of flexibility. And that's whenever you can kind of start looking at making that hire as a paraplanner.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I see a lot of people where, they opt to go for a technical hire first instead of starting with just, okay, well, I'm very competent at doing planning and I'm competent at running the client meetings. Is there a way for me to hire just for administrative needs first? Because then we'll have the volume of planning work where once I decide, okay, I want to put all my gas on just client meetings, business development, firm management, there's enough of a workload for me to actually segment that off so that I can keep a paraplanner busy, instead of just trying to offboard things too quickly. And then too, like your point was, once you're kind of at that stage, you've already built your systems, you've already built ways that you're going to be doing things so that it's easier to plug that person in and also get their feedback, as you're kind of going to the next level of doing improvements. What are some issues that you've encountered or mistakes that you see advisors make when bringing on a paraplanner, or challenges that you've found?
I think, one thing is just understanding kind of what kind of work each one wants to give, and what work each person wants to do, and
Mhm.
having those expectations set clearly up front. The other thing too is advisors, I think, um, unless they're meticulously tracking their time, they don't necessarily understand exactly how long some of the tasks that they do actually take.
Mhm.
Especially like for me, like I know for me, once I get in the software and I'm playing around with scenarios, and I'm like, oh, well, what if we do this, and that, and like, so that's kind of the stuff that lights me up. And I really get in there and really like to do the detail and make sure we're got everything covered. Well, you can burn up an hour or 2 hours pretty quickly if you're not paying attention. And so, hey, well, I did this in a morning. Well, maybe, yeah, you started in the morning, but you'd already been thinking about it for a couple hours before then. Or there's a lot of things like that you just kind of know about a client that
Mhm.
maybe the paraplanner doesn't know. And so you have to remember to fill in those gaps, so that they're not left asking questions and that slows them down and all that. So I think just in general, just making sure that you have a good communication flow, and then understanding what pieces of information that paraplanner is going to need in order to accomplish that. Like advisors that I've worked with that have a very structured system. Hey, when this happens, we do this, and has everything set up like that and systematized. It makes it really easy. So like if you've ever read the book The E-Myth Revisited,
Mhm.
where he talks about setting it up like a franchise, like I want to say, like, kind of think about that is like, okay, whatever roles I'm doing, if I kind of systematize that and make sure that, hey, any minimum viable planner can come in here and do this, then you can hand that off to somebody much more effectively and not have those not have any guessing and not have a lot of back and forth. So I think that's kind of a key piece, especially if you're working with somebody remotely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so something that I do in my firm that I absolutely love, and obviously this is subject to whatever your regulatory requirements are if you're allowed to use these tools, but I use a tool called Loom. And so when I'm going to do something that I know that eventually I'm going to want somebody else to take it on as an activity in the future, I'll record myself doing it with the Loom because it shows my desktop and I just kind of do a narrative as I'm doing whatever the task is. And then after I finish recording the Loom, you're able to pull a transcript off of it. And I take that transcript and I plug it into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to make an SOP based on the video using detailed steps. And it actually does a pretty good job. And so, like, over time, that takes me all of 1 minute to execute in addition to whatever the task is that I'm doing. But then as I'm bringing on new team members and say, hey, I need you to run this kind of projection, or I need you to, update this spreadsheet for this client, because I've recorded myself doing it with all the instructions and everything, I don't have to spend the time to teach that person that. And then if they have questions, they're able to watch the video again instead of having to ask me.
Yeah.
And so if you can use tools like that to, camcorder yourself, it doesn't actually create extra time for you to make these systems because you can collect all of this information. And then, even when you bring somebody on, say, hey, this isn't super organized right now, but here's a database of me doing 10 different plans, or, this is me doing so-and-so's plan last year. It needs to get an update. You can watch me doing their plan for 30 minutes, get your, watch it on 1.5 times speed. And now you'll be ready to do this year's update. So being able to do things like that, it's not like it has to be a perfect system, but if you just take the time to think of, okay, what can I always treat it like two things in my practice of, like, I always pretend that I'm going to get hit by a bus tomorrow. So always leaving breadcrumbs that somebody else could pick up where I left off. And then the other piece is this a task that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my career? And if the answer is no, most likely I should be recording it and saving it somewhere so that when it is time to offboard it, I've got a bank of, here's me doing this several times, or, we're going to change this. Obviously things change over time and maybe you're not recording everything you do, but just realizing, like, okay, I really, if I'm going to be onboarding somebody in 6 months and this is a task that I do every month, let's record it a couple of times so that I can offboard it to, to somebody. I also really liked your point about the, really auditing your time, because I think for a lot of people, especially your first foray into being self-employed and not being forced to be on a time card, it's so helpful to actually keep track of your hours and realize, like, oh, I'm spending a lot of time on this, that, or the other, because then that gives you a methodology to say, okay, if I do bring on a paraplanner, these are realistically the hours that they're probably going to have because this is what it was taking me. And then just being able to tell the relative, labor utilization of, like, okay, so if I have this client and I'm charging them this much and it's taking me this many hours to execute, and I bring in a paraplanner who can do it for, this, whatever cost it's going to be, you can figure out if you're actually getting a good labor utilization rate on that. So it's annoying to have to do all the systems and it's annoying to track all of that. But if you're trying to build a foundation that you want to grow from, the more that you can have those kinds of pieces of data, it's what's going to make you successful. But it's a lot for people to take on. And I guess part of this too, and I'm sure you've experienced this, Brandon, is that realizing that getting some of these SOPs and playbooks and materials in place is something that you can probably have the paraplanner help you with constructing too, right? Like, you don't have to be the one that's producing all of this and then, okay, here you go, follow my instruction manual, but being able to empower that person to then create playbooks out of what they're doing and how you're instructing them. Is that something you've been experiencing too, with helping systemize?
Yeah, I mean, point in case, the advisor client that I have, we just kind of revamped their whole annual Roth IRA conversion workflow and all that, and so I was able to get in the software, look at this other software, and kind of compare what each one does, and then they were able to decide, hey, look, let's go with this, let's do that, and then kind of as I did it, I kept track of all my steps, all that kind of stuff. And then we went back and forth and kind of, you know, tweaked it and kind of built it together. And then now once we have it, then I can just repeat. And then they've got the, the instructions. So if something happens to me or whatever, whatever the case may be, then once again, like you said, it's always there. If somebody gets hit by a bus, hopefully not, then yeah, those, that's all right there. And I think that's just a good business practice in general. If you do something, more than a couple times, then it's probably a good idea to have some kind of a checklist, especially when we're dealing with people's money. Just make sure we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of checklists, especially because, we're on the tax side of things and it is just
Mhm.
so easy to miss some small something if you don't have a checklist that's being gone through. And especially when you're the technical professional and you're handing something off to another technical professional, for you to have a level of quality assurance,
Mhm.
so essential of being able to say, okay, we have this robust checklist. They went through the checklist. If there were issues, they at a certain point, you're not relying as much on their technical ability as their ability to be honest with executing a checklist properly. And that's a
Mhm.
much easier thing to correct for. So I love that piece as well. So for
Yeah.
people who are interested in getting in touch with you or learning more about paraplanning, what are good places for people to connect with you or resources that you recommend for people exploring this?
Yeah, like I said, Simply Paraplanner is a great resource. That's kind of where I got started into doing all this. So that's a great place to start your look for a paraplanner. But as far as connecting with me, LinkedIn is great, or I actually have a paraplanning website. It's just yourvirtualparaplanner.com. So they can look at all my stuff there and check me out. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Nice, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show. And for people listening, those links will be scattered about wherever you're interacting with this this podcast. But thanks so much for joining me, Brandon. I really appreciate your thoughts and bringing this topic to the advisors that are listening.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really had a good time talking about it. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, you too.